Okay. Am I ready to go, Carlos?
Oh, yeah, yeah, you are. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, welcome back, everybody. Sean Modry again. As we were just talking about offline a little bit, we were talking about the current market conditions and the shifting markets. And obviously, markets are fluid, right? So no market in the United States or the world, or really, frankly, in your state, is the same. And so I think that's important to note. So in where one market might be sliding, another market might be appreciating. I like to think of it kind of like waves, right? So if you think of like a pond that's just a still pond and nothing's moving, in the pond, and somebody throws a rock in there, those rocks create waves. And so you can have a section of the pond that has lots of movement and activity and another section of the pond that's still. And over time, that ripple will hit that area, but it takes time for that to get there. So I've noticed that real estate markets operate very much the same way. And our common stimulants with real estate is going to be employment and migration, right? So that's the two things that you want to keep an eye out for in your market. So when you're talking with real estate investors, which is our topic today, is working with real estate investors, employment and migration patterns are going to dictate kind of the market. So what I mean is if your area has an influx of new jobs, right? And what those new jobs are going to do, especially high-paying jobs or high-quality jobs, it's going to attract people that are going to want to work there. That increase in migration increases your rents. That increase in rents supports property values, and that's what allows the market to rise. Now, the reverse of that, where there's certain areas in the United States, the Rust Belt, they call it, right, where migration has fled over the past 20 years. And so real estate values in those areas tend to be lower than areas of similar size or similar demographics. So if you think about like Detroit, for instance, which used to be very large, I think the whole area out there in Detroit was well over 10 million in population. And now I think the population is sitting somewhere around 2.5 to 3 million. So they built this infrastructure size for this large population, and then it moved away as the manufacturing left. And so what you see there is the opposite effect. So job loss, migration patterns move away, rent values drop, and then property values either fall or stagnate. So that's the pattern that you're looking for when you're talking with investors, and it's different everywhere. So in 2008, I actually wrote a blog in 2008 about this. And in 2008, when the real estate market was kind of crashing everywhere, I wrote a blog of places that you could still invest in real estate. And the reason that I wrote it is I had investors that were dumping their properties in areas that were dropping in value, and they were wanting to move their money to areas where they could, sustain or grow their wealth. And those areas were government-based areas. So military bases, government contract areas, and those things. So Virginia, if you look at the real estate market in 2009, 10, 11, 12, Fayetteville, North Carolina, certain areas in the United States didn't really see the impact that, say somewhere like Phoenix, Arizona saw, or even Florida saw, because they don't have that giant amount of government workers. So my important part right there, which I wasn't even going to talk about this morning, but I think is important to note, is don't follow the national news when you're thinking about real estate investing. Real estate investing is extremely market driven, and it literally could be neighborhood to neighborhood. It could be city to city. It's not a rising tide raises all boats, but it's very fluid. Think of it more like a pond with waves kind of moving in and out. All right. So we're going to talk about working with real estate investors today. We're going to talk about opportunities in the market that are either happening right now or going to happen in the future, or did happen or will happen or whatever. So I'm going to help position you so you're kind of paying attention to certain things. So when you're talking to investors, you can, one, you can talk intelligently with them, and two, you can kind of figure out who this person is and what is the type of investing they want, right? Because there's, the term real estate investor is very, very, undescript. Okay, all right. So first off, let's talk about the different types of investors, right? And you could break these into 3 types of investors, or you can break them into 2. All right, but really, for purposes of simplicity, we're just going to break them into 2 different types of investors. All right. So cash flow investors are investors that are looking to buy and hold property. They have a long-term strategy of building wealth, right? Their goal is to pay off the property. That's supposed to say pay off. Over time is to pay it off. They typically will buy 1 to 5 properties over a period of time. So for me, one way that I used to work with cash flow investors is I used to teach real estate investing classes. And what I would teach them is how to become a cash flow investor. And I tell them, what I want you to do is I want you to buy 1 home a year for 5 years, right? And then you're going to hold those properties and you're going to focus on getting those houses paid off. I had some people who focused on buying 10, and then after 10 or 15 years, sell off 5 or 10 of them and pay off the remaining 5, and they'd become wealthy. And I have some of those investors, because we started that back in 2004. Well, one of them is a good friend of mine. He's worth about $5 million today, right? His net worth. He conveniently forgot that I taught him how to do that, so he tends to rub his wealth in my face. But, at the time, unfortunately, I had 117 properties going into 117 doors in 2007 and 2008. So I had to go through the reorganization of real estate investing. Let's just call it that, reorganizing. So for me personally, I love cash flow investors. I got to tell you, the reason is cash flow investors don't tend to want to put their hand in my pocket, okay? So cash flow investors, if you say, hey, here's what we're going to do is we're going to look for properties that are going to cash flow. I'm going to help you find financing. I'm going to help you find the locations. I might even help you find a tenant. So in Colorado, I don't know what your rules are there, but in Colorado, we can help a client find a renter. As long as we're not collecting the deposit and collecting the rent, we're not considered property management. As soon as we touch the deposit or touch the rent, we're property managers. So what a lot of us will do is we'll find them a property, we'll market the property for rent, because a lot of those renters that are calling on the property actually have decent credit and they can be buyers, right? So it creates an opportunity for us to say, hey, if I can help you buy a house, would you be interested in buying a house? So it's another way for us to collect leads for us. But once we have a tenant that's interested in renting that property, we just pretty much hand it over to the investor to manage the contracts, collect the deposit, and those kind of things. So we just do kind of the front end pre-qualification. We are permitted to do the leasing out here without being considered property managers, but for the most part, I don't want anything to do with that part. I'll just hand it off and say, okay, I found your tenant. This person's willing to pay $2,500 a month. They want to be here 2 years. We already had their credit checked. Everything looks good. So cash flow investors are wonderful. The other thing that's great about cash flow investors is because they're a long-term strategy, when they go to sell their properties, they don't tend to have an issue paying you a commission, right? Because their property has doubled over the years, or maybe even in some cases they've gone up 4 times, 5 times, and sometimes. And so for them to pay you, a fair commission for you to sell the property isn't a huge issue to them, right? Some of them are a little cheap, but they're usually willing to pay a fair commission. So cash flow investors are wonderful. The other benefit about cash flow investors is they're pretty easy to find. Right? It's pretty much anybody out there who wants to retire someday, because they don't have to buy 5 properties, right? They literally can buy 1 or 2, have a strategy that's 20 to 25 years to pay those 2 properties off, and they're retired. Okay, because if you think about it, in most areas, if you're buying say a $400,000 house or $500,000 house, that house is easily going to rent for $2,500 a month, right? $2,000 to $2,500 a month. So that investor, once they get that property paid off, is going to have that coming in as straight income. So they're great investors to have. They're great people to work with, and there's a lot of them out there, right? And you can teach them how to become an investor, how to make money long term, and then if you're like me, you buy them too, right? Like I've had cases where I said, hey, if you buy this house, I'll buy the one down the street and I'll help you manage it, right? I help, not property manager. I'm not going to collect your rents, but I'll keep an eye on it with you, and if I need to hire a handyman or something, you'll have access to that handyman too. So cash flow investors are wonderful. Now, accidental investor, those are people that we're going to talk about in a little bit, are people who they actually had a house that they were living in, and they decided to buy another house, and for some reason, maybe they didn't have the equity, maybe they felt like their houses were appreciating and didn't want to sell it, whatever it is, and they ended up becoming an investor. So they rented the property out as a cash flow strategy, but they don't love being a real estate investor, right? And I have a lot of people I've worked with that are exactly, they fall under this. They own rental properties, but they're horrible. They're horrible managers, meaning they have tenants that live there for free. They have tenants that skip paying rent. They don't like dealing with the maintenance of the property, or a lot of times some of the properties are just in very inconvenient locations for them. So I call those accidental investors. They thought they wanted to be an investor, and then they realized, I don't want to be an investor. Okay. The second type of investors that we're going to break it into, and you could separate these two, by the way. You could have speculation and fix and flip as two separate, but I just kind of chunk them together as one, because speculation is the idea that you're going to increase the value, or the value is going to increase over a short period of time. So you could divide those into two different ones, where you could say fix and flip is somebody who's going to do repairs to the property to increase the value, and speculators are just buying the property. Maybe they're changing the zoning, so they're taking it from single family to multi-use, right? That is going to increase the value. Or they're taking it from agricultural to residential. That's going to increase the value. So that's all speculation. But for the sake of this exercise, we're just going to lump anybody who is thinking of increasing the value, not by generating cash flow. We're going to talk about those as speculative investors, okay? So that's going to include fix and flip, land speculation. And so land speculation, again, that's like somebody who's going to buy a piece of land, and they're going to rezone it into something else with the intent to sell the property, okay? So they might take it from agricultural to residential. They might take it from agricultural to commercial. You might take it from residential to commercial. Now the big trend is taking commercial and going back to residential, right? So whatever it is, that's speculation. And then speculation building. So speculation building is when a builder builds a home with the intent to sell it when the home is finished, okay? So that's your speculation building. And I used to do a lot of this back in the early 2000s, and that cleaned my clock. During the recession, I had to pay Chase Bank back $200,000, and I paid him $500 a month for 9 years before that $200,000 was paid off on a spec build that I built, and then the recession hit. So I did sell the house, but I short sailed it, and there was a balance due. And because it wasn't a principal resident, there was Colorado has a recourse state, so they could actually come after me for above the value of the house, and they did. So it took 9 years to pay that house off for me. And speculation is typically short-term strategy. So what I mean by that is speculation, like for a fix and flip, you might be in a house for 6 weeks, right? You want to get in and out as fast as possible, because in speculation, time is money, right? And a lot of speculators are highly leveraged. I know a lot of fix and flippers that, they'll buy a property for say 500,000 and they'll have a loan on it for 550,000, right? So they're putting in 50,000 of their money. The hard money lenders putting up the cost to buy the property plus another 50,000. So they're already leveraged at about 120% of the value of the property. So super high leverage on those things. Speculative building is the same way. That the house I built, it was valued at about 880,000. This was back in 2007, so you can imagine that was a nice house. It was 880,000, and my loan on it was 660,000 on an 880 house. When the market turned, I sold it for $390,000 2 years later. So after it sat for a good year, getting mice in it and all kinds of stuff, it sold for $380,000. All right, so highly leveraged. And speculation investors tend to have multiple projects going. They have, if they're not building one house, they're building three. They're not doing one land speculation deal, they're doing two or three. They're not doing one fix and flip. They've got 10 of them going, or they're thinking they're going to do 10. I have a friend last year here in Colorado did 65 fix and flips last year. 65. So is there any question for anybody on the types of investors? Any investors you can think of that might fall under these categories that I didn't mention? You want to make sure that we categorize them. The reason that this is important is when you meet somebody and they say, yeah, I'm an investor, or I'd like to invest in real estate, you need to figure out what type of investor they are. Are they looking to buy and hold? So they're lower risk, long-term strategy, right? Or are they cash flow, or are they speculation investors where they're looking to get in and get out to make money quickly, and using higher leverage, okay? Because these are two very different types of investors. One is looking to build long-term wealth, right, slowly, and the other one is looking to make money more like a business, right? They're going to treat it like a business. They're going to do this every day. This is going to become their job, right? That's typically speculation investors. They're highly involved, right? It's not a passive strategy, right? If any of you have tried to do a fix and flip, you learn really quick. It's not a passive industry. You've got to be involved. So here's what's going on in the market, and that this is a very important screen to understand, because this is what creates the opportunities for these different types of investors. So in any real estate market, I don't care where you're at, I don't care how hot the market is or how cold the market is, there's three markets, okay? There's the retail market. Now, the retail market we're going to define as sellers that are not pressured to sell, with houses that are in good condition and will qualify for traditional financing. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Ginnie Mae, right? For commercial, it's the same way. For those of you that are on here that are commercial brokers, commercial agents, same thing. These are going to be sellers that don't have to sell, with properties that meet financing conditions. Okay, so that's going to be your retail market. They're putting it up for what they believe is a fair value. They're going to hold until they get that value. All right, so the retail market during compressionary markets, this is when the market heats up, okay, it gets really, really hot. This is what we just went through early March 2022. All of 2021 was a compressionary market where the retail market, the motivated market, and the distressed market got very tight. Okay, they were all really close. So motivated sellers, these are sellers that are possibly in financial distress. So these are people that are, maybe somebody passed away, and they need to sell the property quickly. Maybe they're in bankruptcy and the bankruptcy court is requiring them to sell the house. Maybe they're a couple payments behind and they're facing a foreclosure that's coming, so they need to sell the house quickly. Maybe they got relocated and they have to move quickly for whatever reason. That's a motivated seller, meaning the house, there's nothing wrong with the house, but the seller has urgency. Okay, there's nothing wrong with the house, but the seller has urgency. That market during a hot period of time gets compressed right up here against the retail market. So the difference between the retail market and the motivated seller market is, less than 10%. It's probably closer to 5%. So if a property on the retail market is selling for $500,000 in a hot market like 2021, 2022, a motivated seller might give up $20,000 to $25,000 in value to sell their house quickly. Okay? Distressed properties, these are properties that will not qualify for traditional financing. So they won't qualify for FHA, VA, conventional loans. Maybe it's a property that the well went bad, or the septic system's bad, or the roof is leaking. It's got broken windows. It's been abandoned. Plumbing has been removed. Whatever the reason, it's a distressed property. So again, in a compressionary market in 2021, 2022, the distressed properties were selling almost 15 to 20% below retail, or not even, actually, in some cases, only about 15 to 10% below retail in comparison to the retail market. So again, if the retail market is $500,000, you might see a distressed property sell, somewhere around, $450,000, maybe $425,000, but it's not selling greatly. Not a massive difference between the two markets. Now, in an expansionary market, when we go into a recession, right, when we slow down, when the market slows down, the retail market might fall off. So the difference between this point and this point is only about, anywhere between, 5 to 15% drop in the market. It's not massive, because retail sellers, they don't have to sell, right? They sell because they want to sell. They see another opportunity that they're interested in, so they're not going to give away their home. So it's a smaller slope in a recessionary market from the retail market to the or from the top of the hot market to the bottom of the cold market. Now, motivated sellers, though, because there's more of them during recessionary periods, during slowdowns, there's more people that have to sell. There's more. There's more foreclosures, there's more job loss, there's more relocation that tends to happen. And even in areas that are expensive, what you see is people relocating out of those areas because, maybe they lost their job and their mortgage is $4,000 a month and they can't afford $4,000 a month. So they sell their property because they have to, and they move to an area that's more affordable. And that's a motivated seller, okay? Because they're undue pressure because the job loss is pushing them out of the market. So you're going to see more motivated sellers, and you're going to see more distressed properties. So distressed properties could be, these could be houses that, were in disrepair, houses that sat vacant for a long period of time, bank foreclosures that the bank, foreclosed, had to evict the people. The people then destroyed the property, or it got broken into, and now the bank is trying to resell the property. So these are our distressed properties, right, come in and enter the market. So the reason that they're lower is there's just so much more of them, right? There's many, many more. And when we see the expansionary market at the bottom of the recessionary period, now I want you to notice that this curve corrects, the retail market corrects before the motivated seller and the distressed property market corrects. The reason for that is it takes longer for these to hit the market, okay? If something happens here, right, economic shift happens here, it doesn't show up with distressed properties until anywhere from 6 months to a year later because of the time it takes for banks to foreclose on property and resell them. Here's the important thing that you need to understand here is this expansionary market, the difference between the retail market here and the distressed property market here could be 50%, okay? And I know you're thinking, Not in my market. Maybe not in your market, but there are markets, okay? Because there was a period of time in the last recession, which was pretty significant recession, in comparison to recessions, as far as recessions go, that, we could buy a property for $75,000 and there's houses in the neighborhood that were retail market that were selling close to 200, okay? So it was greater than a 15% differential between a distressed property and the retail market. Now the challenge is how much work did it take to get it back to the retail market? Okay. So the reason this is important is to note that buy and hold investors and speculation investors are going to look for different opportunities based on this market. But all of them can make money in all of these markets if you understand what they're looking for, okay? So a buy and hold investor, they struggle right here because cash flow, right? When the market's super compressed like this, the rents are going to be high, but they're not going to be as high as the retail market. But the nice thing about rents is if you imagine a line struck right through here, rents don't fluctuate as fast as property values, because when even right now, as we see property values dropping throughout the United States, rents are still stable because there's people moving into the rental market because of population, the larger population of millennials than the other population groups. So they're compressing the market, the rental market, and a lot of people are selling their homes and they're moving to other areas and they're choosing to rent, or they're selling their home and staying in the area and they're choosing to rent. So right now we're seeing a relatively stable rent line, but rents aren't supporting values right now. Values, it's very hard to cash flow right now as a cash flow investor. But what's going to happen is as the market starts to slide down, we're going to actually see rent exceed where we call it the cash flow line. And so rent at one point is you're going to be able to buy a property with minimum down, 10 to 15, maybe 20% down, depending on the financing that's available at that time, and you'll be able to cash flow again. So your cash flow investors are going to want to enter here, and your fix and flip investors and your speculative investors, they can actually short the market. So what they will do is they'll buy these distressed properties, clean them, and put them up and resell them as retail. They'll buy distressed, sell it as retail. Buy distressed, sell it as retail. Buy distressed, sell it as retail. Okay, so, or your speculative land investors will find motivated sellers, repurpose the land, sell it as retail. Find a motivated seller, repurpose, and sell it as retail. Or, frankly, just find a motivated seller and just resell it. Okay, so I bought a house one time in the mountains. I paid it was going into foreclosure in 7 days. The guy had 7 days before his house got foreclosed on. I paid him $150,000 for it, and it was worth easily $200,000, $210,000 the day I paid $150 for it. So that was an opportunity for me to buy a house from a motivated seller, and I could have just resold the house, although I kept it as a rental for about 6 years. Okay, so here's the challenges. Actually, before I move on, any questions on compression and expansion of the market? You're going to have to kind of determine for yourself where you feel like the market's going. Again, pay attention to jobs, job creation, job loss, and migration, okay? If people are moving out of your city, you're moving into an expansionary market. If people are moving into your city, meaning more people are moving in than people are moving away, you're going to move into a compression market. If more people are moving away than are moving in, you're going to move into an expansionary market. Okay, just pay attention to that. All right, so here's the challenges for bullish investors, right? So bullish investors are investors that believe the market is a good time to invest, okay? It doesn't mean the market's going up, doesn't mean that the market's going down. It just means that they're bullish, right? They're hungry. They want to invest in real estate, right? They want to get in right now. So their challenge, right? So what is what is the saying? Know thy enemy, right? From what is that? Sun Tzu, right? Art of War, right? Know thy enemy. So you need to understand the challenges your investors are facing in order to be able to help them. Okay, so bullish investors, they want more properties or they want more land, right? Either to buy and hold, to fix and flip, to speculate on. They're looking for more land. So you need to, or more properties. You need to bring them properties. They need a better understanding of the current market conditions. So if the market's trending in a good way, they need to be aware of that. If the market's trending in a bad way, you need to let them be aware of that. Now, what I've found is I don't tell my investors if they should buy or if they shouldn't buy. I'm just coaching them on what's going on in the market and letting them make their best decisions. I used to, 15 years ago, try to predict the market more and try to guess when to get in and when to get out. But what I found, especially, looking at, post-COVID, there's a lot of interaction and intervention that the governments can do to change the market rapidly. So I've gotten away from coaching them to buy and to not buy and just coach them on, here's what's going on in the market, right? Here's the current comps in the area. Here's the price reductions. Here's the price increases. Here's the financing options, those kind of things, okay? So they have a better understanding of what is going on so they can make their own decisions, all right? But real estate investors, they want to work with agents that understand the process, the challenges that they're facing, and the situation. So the process is if they're buy and hold investors, they need you to understand the process of finding a buy and hold property and analyzing buy and hold properties. So this means being able to do cash on cash return projections. Some investors like cap rate projections, ROI, internal ROI, all those things some investors want. Most buy and hold investors are pretty simple, right? They just want to know how much they're going to cash flow month over month, a couple hundred, whatever it is. They want an agent that understands the challenges that they're facing. So challenges that are common for all real estate investors, if you're buy and hold, is dealing with tenants, dealing with evictions, right? Those kind of things. So if you're not familiar with that, then this is a great opportunity for you to reach out to a local eviction attorney, grab a lunch with them or go meet them at the office, and then tell them that you're interested in working with investors and you want to have a better understanding of the eviction process in your area. This is also a great opportunity for you to have a conversation with that eviction attorney about clients that they might have that might need real estate services. Because I'll tell you, if you're dealing with evictions, you think about selling your properties, right? Like you're like, man, this property, this is the third person I've had to evict. Maybe it's time to sell this, right? And they want agents that understand their situation, right? So their financial situation, what their goals are, right? Like if they're trying to build long-term wealth, they want an agent that understands that that's their goal. So for instance, if you're dealing with a cash flow investor and they say, well, my goal is to buy a property and pay it off in 10 years, and you're telling them to over leverage, you're not understanding their situation. You're not understanding what their goal is, right? If you're dealing with a fix and flip investor that's looking to create a job out of this and you say, well, this will be a great investment in 5 years from now. Well, that's not going to work for a fix and flip investor. Okay. So these are the challenges for bullish investors. So if you understand how to solve these for people, you can help them, right? Now, bear investors, these are investors that are not confident about the market, right? They feel like the market is shifting. They're feeling like maybe they're over leveraged and they need to get out of some of their properties. So remember, I told you in 2008, I had 117 doors. I had 2 apartment buildings that totaled 86 units. I was invested in 3 different states. I had 3 houses under construction, and then I had 20 some odd cash flow rental properties, right? And so what happens immediately when the market starts to shift is you have properties that are underperforming, okay? So you have properties that maybe, I call them an alligator, right? They take a bite out of you every month. So they're losing $200, $300, $400 a month. And you're thinking, okay, well, they're not appreciating now like they were. So what's the benefit of losing $300, $400 a month to hold this property? So that's an underperforming asset, right? You also have properties, investors also have properties that are inconvenient to them. So maybe they have a property that they bought when they lived in Boston, and now they've moved and they live in Chicago now. And it's just very inconvenient for them to manage it. And because it's not appreciating, there's not a lot of upside for them to hold on to it, right? So, maybe they paid $300 for it. It's worth $700 now. They have some equity into it. Who knows? Maybe they lived in it for two of the past 5 years, and they could sell the property now and avoid capital gains on a significant portion of that property. So this would be a great time for them to sell an inconvenient or underperforming property. A lot of speculative investors are over-leveraged. So we talked about this with spec building, with any kind of fix and flip and those kind of things. They're typically over-leveraged, and they're not cash flow properties. So they don't have the income coming in to be able to sustain that property long term. So they're forced into a situation where they have to dump a property or move a property quickly before their financing terms end or change. Okay, now this is exactly what happened to me. Is I finished one of my houses, and I was in a construction loan, and I didn't want to convert the construction loan to permanent financing. So the bank called my note due. All right, so they called the note due, and then they were saying, hey, if you don't pay us off, then we're going to foreclose on the property. And then they began their foreclosure process. So it forced me as a builder to have to short sale the property in order to get it sold before the bank foreclosed on it. So that is short-term financing, right? I mean, if I had permanent financing on it, I probably could have rented it, lost $1,000 a month for 5 years, and then sold it. Might have been a better scenario. Who knows? But at the time, because I had a construction loan and I wasn't in permanent financing, the construction loan ended, the note was called due, and I was forced to sell. So that happens to a lot of speculation investors. And money was cheap for the past 5 years, guy, and money was abundance for the past 5 years. So a lot of speculative properties are overfinanced right now, are way over leveraged, right? Bear investors also are sitting on vacant properties, either speculative or cash flow. They bought them, they thought they were going to rent them out, and they didn't. They bought them as a Airbnb, VRBO, short-term rental. It's not getting maybe they're not getting as much occupancy as they thought they were going to get. And then remember our accidental investors that ended up investing because they, let's say that they accidentally ended up investing and now they're in a property that again isn't depreciating. It's inconvenient to them. It's underperforming, and they feel like it's time to sell because there's just not a lot of future upside to the property. So that's the challenges for bear investors, okay? So what do you need to do? What do you need to do as an agent is you need to learn how to find undervalued cash flow properties, right? Because investors that are bullish, that's what they're going to want to buy right now, right? Undervalued cash flow properties. And that's going to be either properties, as we talked about here, that are motivated sellers and distressed properties, right? So motivated sellers, foreclosure, bankruptcy, those kind of things. Distressed properties are going to be your bank-owned, maybe even fix and flips that didn't get finished, right? New construction that didn't get finished are great opportunities to buy discounted properties, okay? Look for loans that are assumable, okay? A lot of people right now that got loans over the past, 5 to 8 years have these really, really low interest rates, and those loans, a lot of those loans are assumable. So they're qualify assumable, but they're still assumable. So take that advantage of those assumable type loans and sellers that are willing to allow a buyer to assume the loan. Owner carry properties. So if you own a property, let's say you own a property, let's call it a duplex, right? And let's say this duplex is worth $800,000 and you've owned it for 30 years and you bought it for, maybe you paid $75,000 for it or $100,000. Let's just be conservative. Let's say $140,000 30 years ago you paid for this duplex and now it's worth $800,000. And it's been an investment property the whole time you've held it. Well, your capital gains exposure on that property is $660,000. Okay, $660,000. And if you take that money and you put it in your bank account, you're going to get taxed between 15 and 25% depending on your income. Okay, so if you're 65, 70 years old, that's a hard pill to swallow. However, if they own or carry the property to a new buyer, they're only paying capital gains on the amount received for that year. Okay, so they could sell the property and take 20% down. So they're taking $160,000 down out of the $800,000, and they're getting, let's say they get 7% interest on their loan. And so they're going to receive, let's say $5,000 a month or $60,000 a year in income, while they carry that note for the buyer. But they're only paying capital gains on the $60,000 as it comes in, as opposed to paying capital gains on the $660,000 that increases their income and it gives them a greater exposure. So an owner carry is a great way for a seller to avoid capital gains and to sell their property. So if you can keep your eye out for those opportunities, that's going to be great for investors, right? You've got to learn how to find motivated sellers, right? And you're going to need to learn how to find distressed properties. And so distressed properties, again, these are bank owns, foreclosures, those kind of properties, okay? So how do you find investors? Well, how do you find these investors to work with, Sean? Like, where are we going to find these? Well, number one, construction sites. Okay, so construction sites, not like, your neighborhood home builder, but construction sites like you see a house that's getting remodeled. You see a house that's getting the top, they're popping the top or doubling the size by expanding on top of it. Go talk to that person. There's a good likelihood that person is a real estate investor that might be interested in selling their property, or they have other properties that they're interested in selling. So, fix and flippers, like I said, they have more than one property going. It's really common, right? For rent signs, VRBO and Airbnb, contacting those investors and asking them if they're interested in selling. And I'm going to give you the script for that in a minute. For sale by owners, right? A lot of investors will try to sell their house for sale by owner, especially because they've had success with it over the past 5 years. Although we all know it's much more challenging today to sell a house for sale by owner than it was 5 years ago, right? Public records search. So what I look for in public records search is vacant properties, right? So, or non-owner occupied properties. So you can search public records and you can look for properties where the owner's mailing address is different than the property address. So that's going to be obviously an investment property. You can also search an area and do a big wide search in public records and then export it, say take 2,000 homes in an area, export it into a CSV file, eliminate the properties that the mailing address is the same as the property address, and then sort the remaining data by the address. And what that's going to do is that's going to put all of the owners together that own the same property. So for me, like with my properties, I hold them in LLCs and different names, but the mailing address is the same for all the properties. So if you were to do that, you would see, 4, 5, 6 properties in an area that are all owned by the same address. And you could then look up that address, find the phone number, call the investor, and find out if they have properties that they're interested in selling. It's actually a very effective way to find investors. It's actually one of the best ways to find investors because they're, good investors are always looking to buy, and some investors own multiple properties, and they always have something that they're interested in selling, right? Another way is to contact your local bank and your local credit unions, because they're the ones that are lending the money on the speculative land, on the fix and flips, on the on those opportunities, those speculative deals. They're the ones that are lending that, and they'll be able to introduce you to investors that are actually, maybe some of them are in distress, or some of them are actually looking to buy more properties. And then finally is pre-foreclosure lists. So if you get your pre-foreclosure lists, you can, or even going to your local auctions, you can meet investors there and use the pre-foreclosure list to attract investors. Because I've never met an investor who's not interested in buying a foreclosure, okay? 99% of investors want properties at a discount. They're not looking to pay retail prices for them, right? They're looking to buy under market and resell it, or buy it under market, repair it, and rent it, okay? So here's our investor script. So this script has made me hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years, and it's so simple. So this is the one that you could use for a property for rent, right? I see that you have a property for rent located at 123 Main Street. Have you considered selling it, right? So we're just calling a property for rent. We could be calling a VRBO. I see you have a property on Airbnb located at 123 Main Street. Have you considered selling it? Now, they're obviously going to say no most of the time. Sometimes, less than 5% of the time, they're going to say, yes, I'm interested in selling it. But here's the turn, okay? Here's where we're going to flip the script on them. Are you interested in buying undervalued and off-market homes? Are you interested in buying undervalued and off-market homes? So that's going to be the way we're going to flip that script for them. And then lastly is, when I come across a good deal, would you like me to call you? I'm telling you, you will talk to 20 investors and 18 of them will say, yes, call me. Okay? The key to this is undervalued and off-market homes, and the opportunity for that you're going to be proactively calling them. And then you just have to do it. Like if they say yes, you need to find them a deal within 72 hours to put in front of them. It doesn't have to be the best deal in the world, but you need to show them that you're out there finding deals. Okay? So, any questions on the scripting? And I'm going to give you guys another resource here before we finish up. Our last call. All right, here we go. So as you know, I talked about last week, I created an app. So I took all my scripts, all my coaching and everything and built it into this app. And I'm going to show you exactly how you could use this with working with real estate investors. So this is the main screen here. And what you'll see, I have this little resource section here. So you just simply click on resources and it pulls up the different types of clients that we as real estate agents work with every day, right? We work with home sellers, we work with home buyers, we work with past clients and sphere of influence, right? And so we're going to go ahead and click on an investor who might be interested in buying. We're going to call them home buyers, right? It's going to pull up this card here that says home buyers, first-time buyers, move-up buyers, or real estate investors. We're going to click on real estate investors, and it pulls up this section here that says connect, book appointment, or follow up. So we just talked to a real estate investor, or we want to connect with one. So we're going to go ahead and click on connect. And then it gives us all of the resources because we clicked on connect. It's going to give us all of the resources that we need to work with a real estate investor. So we have pre-written surveys. We have, are you interested in investing videos? And all you have to do is click on 1 minute survey, and then it pulls up the email, it pulls up a text, or you can share it on social media. So like if you're trying to think of a way to generate some business from real estate investors, you could just simply click on the social media link, okay? And then it pulls up this video that you could post onto Facebook, right? Investing in real estate, 10 things every real estate investor needs to know, okay? And they can watch the video and book a call with you, or you can send them 7 reasons why 2021, I need to update that, is ripe for real estate investors. Fix and Flip 101, Guide to Fixing and Flipping Houses. Best Hard Money Lenders in 2022. That's an article I wrote for The Close that, by the way, is like one of the top rated articles on the internet right now. That one gets a ton of views. Or down here, you see I have rent versus buy worksheets, fix and flip evaluation worksheet, cash flow investment worksheets. So you have all your resources you need to work with real estate investors. And another benefit is all the coaching for the resources is here. So if you're like, well, I don't know how to fill out a fix and flip evaluation worksheet. Well, you go to coaching, real estate investors, and it's going to give you all the training for that. So the cool thing is right now, for you guys, I'm offering a 14-day trial for $1, right? And then afterwards, it's $79.95. I'm sure over time, we're going to raise the price of this. This app just launched on Thursday. It's brand new. One of the users got 7 referrals the first day she used the app. So really excited about it. So if you have any questions, you can go to mytrioapp.com. Feel free if you have any questions on that. But if you're interested in continuing to work with me, again, I'm going to do weekly coaching on this for all the app users and that kind of stuff. But other than that, any questions on anything we covered today before we end our session?